Hello and welcome to night number 8 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. I am your host, Adam. Starring Jane Levy, Shiloh Fernandez, and Lou Taylor Pucci, this is Fede Alvarez's 2013, not quite a remake, not quite a sequel, Evil Dead. That's right, we're dropping the from the title. The 2013 Evil Dead film hits most of the same beats as the original 1981 film. However, with this one we have a little bit of a different opening. This one here has some redneck hillbilly people that are out in the woods, and they're helping a father cleanse his daughter's soul by fire. This whole scene kind of sets up the actual tone of the film. It's a different animal from Sam Raimi's original film. This film in some ways is actually quite pretty with some of the scenery and shots that Fede Alvarez pulls off. But after that little opening scene, it's pretty much the same movie as the original, only it's a little bit more gory, I would say, than the original. You have 5 friends go up to a cabin in the woods, but instead of a nice little getaway or vacation, instead they're there for an intervention of Jane Levy's Mia character. The book is found and the book is read, and then basically the demons are unleashed. You have Mia getting possessed out in the woods, and she's kind of the hero yet villain throughout the movie, which is kind of interesting, I guess. This here is actually a tough movie for me to sort of talk about because I don't know if I like it or not, and that's after seeing it many times since the original release. I'm not really a fan of remaking or rebooting franchises, especially if they are out of continuity. I think if something is rebooted, that usually it should be taken with what was done before, and there's no reason why it cannot exist or cohabitate with the original film. This one here has enough that would actually make you think that it's in the same continuity, and in many ways I think it would. However, tonally, it doesn't quite gel with anything that Sam Raimi has done with the franchise and series. Everybody involved does a good job here. It's a movie that is well acted by everyone. And again, I have to mention about the special effects. This is a movie where they did things right as far as the effects go, because it's mostly practical effects with CGI touch-ups. The only reason they used CGI was to make everything just look a little bit better, but you can't really tell that they used CGI in many of the shots. It actually just looks like straight up practical effects, which is awesome. That's one of the best things they could have done with this movie. But remember when I said about the tone? The tone is something that I have an issue with. I don't mind vulgarity in films. It doesn't bother me one way or another, but in this it stuck out for me. The stuff that Mia is saying, spoiler alert, when she's possessed and in the basement, similar to the Linda character in the Sam Raimi 81 original, it's just over the top vulgar, and I don't think it really fits. If anything, it reminds me of having more of an Exorcist kind of vibe with it. It really sounds like something that Reagan would have said as opposed to somebody in the Evil Dead universe. So I just kind of chalk that up to modern horror in an attempt to shock us, not so much with the visuals, but shock us with what we're hearing that they're saying. And even then, it's not necessarily shocking, it's just kind of not fitting with the Evil Dead universe up until that point. They did change that a little bit in the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV show. However, I intend to talk about that on a different night, so I'm not going to talk about that too much here. I must go and get back to the direction of Fede Alvarez. This is a competently directed film, and it looks great. As I said, he crafts some great shots. However, it lacks intensity. There's a lot of scenes in the movie where Sam Raimi was organizing chaos, and this just kind of feels tame in a lot of spots. I was told by people on movie boards already that I was wrong in my opinion, but if you try to compare the two films, they're just like a night and day, and I prefer Raimi's original to this one just based off of the intensity. There's zero intensity in a lot of these shots. It's a shame because when we do get those semi-intense shots towards the end, I was just kind of bored with it and I was waiting for the movie to be over. There is 2 different cuts out there. There is a theatrical cut and there is an unrated cut that is coming out a little bit later this month on Blu-ray. It's currently available on streaming services. This adds a little bit more blood and gore to the mix, has a few more character scenes. It's not necessarily better, but it does have a little bit more of a homage to the original Evil Dead film, with some of the things that Mia is doing when she's locked away down in the basement. I guess one of the cool things about this is that Sam Raimi, Robert Tappert, and Bruce Campbell were all producers on this film, so it did have their seal of approval. They also made sure that it was set in the same continuity. Originally, at one point in time, they were supposed to do a sequel to this film, as well as sort of tie it together with the Sam Raimi Ash films. But I don't know how that would have actually gelled. There was supposed to be an Army of Darkness 2 somewhere along the way. It never happened. I just chalk it up to Sam Raimi and company just messing with us. This is a movie that definitely has its fans out there, and I know that everybody loves the Mia character. I was kind of indifferent to it. I don't necessarily mind a female Ash. That's almost what we got here. By the end of it, she's essentially an Ash-like character. However, I think that Alison Lohman in Drag Me to Hell pulled off the female Ash-like character a little bit better than Jane Levy here. However, that's not to say that she's not good in the role. She just doesn't give me that, hey, she's a badass type of feeling. Overall, I would have to say that some of the little touches that they have are cool, such as the main characters. If you take the first letter of each of their names in the film, it actually spells out demon. I guess that's kind of neat in a way. But overall, I would say stick with the Sam Raimi original films. I think they're more fun personally. You may like the humorless, extreme version here on display, but it's just one of those things that I would just prefer to watch the originals as opposed to this. And I think I'm going to end this one right there. Thank you for listening. Again, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. And you can also check us out on our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 9 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. I am your host, Adam. Starring Bruce Campbell and Sarah Berry, this is Sam Raimi's 1987 follow-up that some actually confuse to be a remake of the Evil Dead 2. With a quick recap, because Sam Raimi couldn't actually get the rights to show the original footage, it shows Ash actually go up to the cabin with his girlfriend Linda. Missing this time around are the 3 other characters from the original Evil Dead film. Ash is the lone survivor, and he winds up surviving the night. However, the Evil Dead are not done with him, where he actually goes and gets possessed and gets thrown through the woods. Sunlight scares them off, and Ash is back to his normal self. This time around, Sam Raimi has a little bit of a bigger cast, such as Annie Noby, played by Sarah Berry, Jake, played by Dan Hicks, and Bobby Joe, played by future soap star Cassie DePavia. One of the big things anybody will notice compared to the original Evil Dead film, this one had a much bigger budget. It wasn't a big budget film by any means, however, Sam Raimi, with his know-how, made every bit of that $3 million budget work. Also, one of the big things that Sam Raimi seemed intent to do is to create a hyper-violent movie. He tried to avoid an NC-17 or even an X rating this time around by including various different colors of blood and gore, such as green and black. However, it didn't exactly work, as the movie was still slapped with an NC-17. I do believe that the film has been re-rated since and is actually an R-rated film. Another one of Sam Raimi's intentions with this is to seemingly parody himself, because it's hard to take anything in the movie seriously. If you're looking for a violent, serious-toned horror film like the first one, you're not going to get it here. It's a movie that has laughing deer heads and laughing lamps, and even Ash's own cut-off hand that seemingly has a mind of its own. Everything in this movie is very slapsticky, almost Three Stooges inspired, which is intentional. Sam Raimi is a big Three Stooges fan, as well as Bruce Campbell and Robert Tappert. That appears to be the big inspiration here. Whether this will actually entertain you, or if you'll prefer the first one, is going to definitely depend on your taste and type of horror film. I actually like both of these for their own different feels. Let me put it that way. One thing of note is this movie has an awesome making of that appeared on several DVDs and Blu-rays throughout the years. It was the first film that K&B Effects actually worked on. You may know the name, maybe not. However, they are known as one of the best special effects companies in the business, and headed up by Greg Nicotero, who is producer of The Walking Dead and does the special effects for The Walking Dead. So if you're kind of into seeing how some of the little guys get their start, this is actually a fun thing to watch. It's obvious that everybody on set had an absolute blast, and it makes you almost wish that you were there with them making the film. The impressive thing is also that this movie has gotten positive reviews from critics. If you are into checking Rotten Tomatoes scores, this actually has a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it seems to be generally universally loved amongst fans and critics. So, is this a movie that I can 100% fully recommend to somebody? I would say that yes, I would definitely recommend it. And that's just based off of my love for the series. I like how each of the films in the Evil Dead series actually has a different feel to it. However, I also, by the same token, feel a little cheated that we did not get an actual horror series from the Evil Dead. It's a series that evolved from horror to comedy horror to forgetting horror and going with a medieval swashbuckling action type of film. I will get into Army of Darkness in the next episode, so I'm not going to talk too much about that here. However, my recommendation on this, that this is a film that needs to be seen. Its practical effects still hold up today, in my opinion. Not only that, it shows the confidence of a filmmaker that should have been still growing, but seems like a fully fleshed out filmmaker by this point. One more thing to note is with the way Sam Raimi directed this film, you can definitely see influences on his later work, such as Spider-Man 2. The scene where Doc Ock actually kills the scientists in Spider-Man 2 is something that is straight up Evil Dead. And with that, I think I'm going to close out this episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. And also, please give a listen to our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 10 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring Bruce Campbell and Embeth Daviditz, this is Sam Raimi's 1992 final entry in the Evil Dead trilogy, Army of Darkness. With opening up a time portal in Evil Dead 2, Ash finds himself transported to 1300 AD, where he must battle the army of the dead and retrieve the Necronomicon so he can return home. First things first on this movie, it has probably one of my favorite taglines to any film. It is, trapped in time, surrounded by evil, low on gas. And while it doesn't do a good job of summing up the movie, that tagline kind of sums up the feel and attitude of the film. Here we have Ash once again as the hero. However, he is at his cockiest and most arrogant here. He went from a meek, very scared of everything type of character from Evil Dead 1. And then Evil Dead 2, he became more of the awesome type of action hero that we would maybe expect. And here he is in full arrogant action hero mode. It really suits the movie quite well because it has a very different feel. You know it is a Sam Raimi film and you know it's an Evil Dead film. However, it's not exactly horror. If anything, this is a swashbuckling action type of film with horror-like elements. There's definitely everything here from the Evil Dead universe. However, everything is even more comedic than Evil Dead 2. With all of the comedy going on, Sam Raimi even felt the need to actually include the original sound effects that were actually used in the Three Stooges films. Personally, I like that change and addition. However, if you're actually looking for an all-out horror film or even something that feels like Evil Dead 2, you're not going to get it here. It's an R-rated movie. However, it really could have been PG-13. I can't think of too much in this movie that really makes it an R-rated film. And that's where this entry in the Evil Dead franchise kind of divides fans. There are either some that love it, some that will take the series as a whole, or some that will out and out dismiss Army of Darkness and pretend it doesn't exist. I'm one of those where I prefer the other entries probably to Army of Darkness. However, that doesn't make it any less of a movie in my opinion. It's still a fun movie and it's one that I could probably watch over and over again and not really get bored or tired of it. One of the things I think that makes this movie fun is actually Sam Raimi's inclusion of King Arthur and Merlin. It's kind of cool to hear these mythological figures in the Evil Dead universe. It was very inventive in my opinion, and I think it was really cool of Sam Raimi to do. Special effects and direction here are top notch. Everything looks great. I would say the Deadites look great here. They definitely look the best that they have ever looked. And then also the stop motion with the skeletons I think look really cool. It's one of the neat things about it is that Bruce Campbell here plays two roles. He plays not only Ash, but he plays Evil Ash as well. And he does a good job with differentiating both of them. Everyone else here is good as well, with Embeth Daviditz probably turning out a pretty good part. You may know her from some later films such as Schindler's List, so she definitely went on to some bigger and better things. Everyone throughout the rest of the movie pretty much turns in acting performances that you would expect of this type of movie. Not to say they're bad, but not to say that they're really good either. There is multiple cuts of this film floating around. There is the original theatrical cut, there is the director's cut, and then there's the international cut. I think probably the best one is the international cut. I will say that the TV version as well is decent. They all have their own merits of why they might be good. The big difference between them may be the ending that's included on whichever cut you watch. So you're definitely going to have a different experience with whichever one you decide to choose. With the theatrical ending, you have an all-out action-packed set piece in the S-Smart. Looks like Ash got back to his right time and evil followed him. What does he do? He decides to be a badass. It's one of those things that I think it's an awesome ending. However, a little bit more fitting is the one in the director's cut that Universal had Sam Raimi change, and that is where he takes too many drops of the potion that Merlin makes him, and he sleeps too long. So he basically sleeps to the death of man. This sets it up for a pretty entertaining would-be Evil Dead 4. However, that's not officially canon at all. And I will say that that type of ending is something that the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV show kind of ended with. However, I am not going to talk about Ash vs. Evil Dead here. That will be on the next episode. So we're going to do an entire rundown of the Evil Dead series. But that's about all I have to say for Army of Darkness. If you haven't checked it out, definitely see them all in order. It's a pretty rewarding experience overall. And I'm going to end it here. Just a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. And also, please give it a listen to our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. I guarantee you'll have a good time with it. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 11 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. So in an effort to do a complete talk about the Evil Dead series, I am going to try something a little bit different, and no, this is not a movie. However, some of the episodes are as good as a movie in my opinion. So, starring Bruce Campbell, Ray Santiago, and Dana DiLorenzo, this is the belated follow-up to Sam Raimi's Evil Dead trilogy, Ash vs. Evil Dead. Since it's a little difficult to do a full rundown on 3 complete seasons of a TV show, I'm going to actually read the official plot. Ash has spent the last 30 years avoiding responsibility, maturity, and the terrors of the Evil Dead until a deadite plague threatens to destroy all mankind, and Ash becomes mankind's only hope. So one of the things I think that needs to be said is this show is definitely in the vein of Evil Dead 2 and even approaches some of Army of Darkness level silliness, which it's not exactly a bad thing. However, if you're looking for something that's more in the vein of the original film, you're probably not going to enjoy this as much. But with that being said, I feel that this show was an absolute blast. Even on its weak episodes, it was still fun to watch, and it never got to the point where I did not want to watch it. So what we actually have here is pretty much a very, very long movie follow-up to the original Evil Dead series, and honestly, I think it works. One of the things that I think did not work in its favor is the fact that Sam Raimi seemed to only be involved with the first episode. The first episode of Ash vs. Evil Dead is definitely the right start for the series. It feels like Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi never left, and sadly most of the episodes that followed did not have the same, energy. It's one of those things, like one of my biggest complaints with the Evil Dead remake is the fact that it didn't have the same energy. And the directors that followed Sam Raimi, they weren't necessarily bad, but it wasn't the same feel. However, once you get over that, it's not bad at all. And a lot of the humor works, a lot of the scares and blood and gore were fun to see. Bruce Campbell steps back into the role of Ash again like he never left. He plays the role maybe a little bit too inept occasionally, but that's mostly script writing more than him. In some ways, it would actually be fair to compare him to how maybe Charlie on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia or Homer Simpson on The Simpsons. They proceeded to get more dumb and inept as the series are going on, and I would say that Ash is a different kind of Ash. However, he is yet the same Ash at the same time, so it's a little difficult to describe the differences in character. Just know that you're not getting 100% the same one that you might have known. I do have to talk a little bit about the special effects in the show. That was one of my biggest gripes probably in the first season. The first season relied a little bit too much on CGI. Thankfully, that was corrected by the time the second and third season rolled around. Once you see the demon in the first season, you'll know exactly what I mean with it being a little too CGI. Ash's friends that are joining him on his journey are Pablo and Kelly, played by Ray Santiago and Dana DiLorenzo. Both of them, I think, are good additions to the Evil Dead series. I don't think they would work without the Ash character, which is suggested as far as a continuation. But yeah, they definitely need Ash to bounce off of or even look up to. Thankfully, the show actually avoids the same traps that The Walking Dead and other shows of its type may have actually fell prey to, and that is having a lot of filler episodes. There is not a lot of filler here. Everything is fairly tight. There are a few throwaway episodes. Maybe it's a little disappointing overall, but most of the episodes are good. They keep the plot moving. It moves at a pretty breakneck speed for a TV show. Not only that, I would say that some of the strongest episodes are probably the opening to the series and then probably the ending to each season. I actually really enjoyed the ending to Season 2. Season 2 more or less goes back before the original Evil Dead movie took place, and then the movie and created its own storyline. It was a brilliant move in my opinion, and it allowed the show to breathe a little bit and I guess basically be relevant. One of the things I really enjoyed too is actually the ending to Season 3. The ending for Season 3 had Ash face off against a giant deadite. It included some things that could have been seen as a little bit of a ripoff of Stranger Things with its own little upside down type of world. But it was good to see Ash have some maturity here, especially with his daughter. That was one of the things revealed in Season 3. He has a daughter by the name of Brandy, and she was a great addition and a great idea. One of the worst things about it, though, is that it seemed like they were setting it up that Kelly was going to be his daughter. But they went back on that a little bit and decided to, I guess, do the unexpected. But what we have here in that last episode is some definite character development and character growth. It's great to see Ash actually go and show his mature side when he's saying goodbye to Kelly, Pablo, and Brandy. It's actually just a great scene because Bruce Campbell is pouring his heart into what he's saying to them, and we buy it. We buy that this is Ash saying it. But I can't help but feel with the ending of the season here that we actually have him saying goodbye to the role. One other thing that was a missed opportunity on the show was actually Lee Majors' character. He actually played Ash's dad. Sadly, he was only in a few episodes. It was great to have him, but I think that it was a serious misstep to kill him off so quickly. Sure, that's a spoiler right there. So, this show seems to be the end of the Evil Dead series. Bruce Campbell has now gone on to say that he is no longer going to do the Ash role or really be involved with the Evil Dead franchise or series. So, this is about it. I wish there was more. I'm incredibly grateful to actually have further adventures of Ash. So it was good to have 3 seasons. I honestly think that we were lucky to get those 3 seasons. To a fan like me, it was everything. Starz actually may have been the wrong network to have this show. I wish it would have went somewhere else, but it didn't. Sadly, the ones that were supporting the show got new bosses in between season 2 and 3, and that's what resulted in the show's cancellation. Also, they wanted to cite low ratings. However, they really weren't promoting season 3 as heavily as season 1 and season 2, so they were basically moving in a different direction, and they were trying to, in fact, kill the show off. Way to go, Starz. You succeeded. I would say definitely check this out. If you are a fan of Evil Dead, if you're a fan of horror, whatever, you want comedy, this show has it all. It's one of those you can just put on, and each episode's a half hour. So you can knock out an entire season in no time. But with that, I'm going to end tonight's episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. And also, please give a listen to our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 12 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. I am your host, Adam. Starring Jessica Harper, this is Dario Argento's 1977 Italian classic, Suspiria. Jessica Harper plays Susie Banyan, and she travels to Germany to attend a ballet school. She finds out that weird things are happening, and then also that the school was once a witch's coven, and it still is. So this is a movie I viewed a few times throughout the years. It recently got a re-release of a nice remaster that was remastered in 4K and whatnot, and it makes the movie look really nice. This is a movie that was known mostly for its color palette. There is probably no other movie out there that looks like this. Even other films, such as maybe George Romero's Creepshow, that was very colorful. It does not reach the levels that this one does. With that said about the movie, this has never been one of my favorite films. I recognize its importance, and I just really can't get into it overall. It is kind of a movie that you should experience once in your life just because it's just a unique experience. I would have to say one of my biggest complaints with the movie is that the story is there, however, it's very loose with its story. Instead, it's more of a visual film, so it does have some very artsy and artistic merit to it. However, if you're going in looking for an actual cohesive story, you're not going to find it here because it is kind of all over the place. There is the little tidbits throughout, which is where you find out about the witch's coven and stuff like that. However, it requires a little bit more work from you as a viewer in order to unlock a lot of that. Dario Argento's direction here is also very unique. He does have some pretty odd set pieces. Not only that, he has some inventive blood and gore as well as some inventive kills. The score is something that people have praised as well, and while the opening score to the movie I kind of dig, some of the more oddball jazzy numbers that are scattered throughout the movie are things I could probably do without. And I will say one of the things that may be an actual deal breaker for everybody is the dubbing of the film. What we have here is Italian actors actually mouthing English, and then it was dubbed over in either English or Italian, depending on where you were viewing the movie. It's not a deal breaker for me, however, some of the dubbing is pretty awkward and off, and it just doesn't really go with a lot of the acting. But considering this is a foreign film, I'm giving it a pass. I'm not considering that as either a detractor or even addition. Some people may think that it might be cheesy in its own right, and it is, but it's mostly because it's a movie that was made in the 70s, so that kind of acting would be acceptable. One of the big reasons that I decided to revisit this is because I do have an interest in the Amazon Studios Suspiria remake. From what I hear, that's not an actual remake other than a complete reimagining, so I guess it's not really the same type of film. However, it does have the same title, and it does have a good cast, such as Tilda Swinton playing both a man and a woman in the remake. However, that's the remake. Let's stay focused on the original. Is this a movie that I would recommend to you guys? I would say yes. As I stated earlier, it's a visual feast to watch. Try to see it on a nice TV or even in a theater, and it might be something that you have a good time with, even if it does come up short with its story aspects. Overall, it's a movie that's not one of my favorites. However, I definitely recognize why this is an important movie in both horror as well as film in general. It's a gorgeous movie in many respects, and also it's a movie that if you open your mind and get taken away by the visuals, you can really, really get into it. Personally, I don't know if just viewing this, if I want to see the actual other parts of the so-called Three Mothers trilogy, but it's something I would consider, and I'm kind of interested to see what kind of other films that Dario Argento has made. I do know that he is a big Alfred Hitchcock fan, and some of his films echo that, so that might be something that I'm going to have to look into in the future. And with that, I think I'm going to end this episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also, check out our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 13 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. I am your host, Adam. Starring Jocelyn Donahue, this is Ty West's 2009 homage to the 70s and 80s movies of old, The House of the Devil. Set in 1983, struggling college student Samantha takes a strange babysitting job that coincides with a full lunar eclipse. She slowly realizes her clients harbor a terrifying secret, putting her life in mortal danger. This here is a movie that I don't know how many people are fans of, or if it has a big following or not. I personally am a big fan of this movie. One of the reasons that I love this movie so much is that it shows great restraint from director Ty West, and also it has a very 70s and 80s style feel. It's very apparent from the moment you start watching it that you're watching a movie that loves the movies from the 70s and 80s. This here is a movie that's set in 1983, and it honestly feels like it. You have authentic hairstyles, you have authentic styling as far as the clothes that everybody's wearing. You even see old school Coke logos on the cups at the pizza restaurant near the beginning. Even the music has a very definite 80s slant to it. It's one of the movies that I really like because the style is here, and it honestly does a lot better than some of the other grindhouse style films that came out around the same time in 2008, 2009. So with that, I actually want to talk about the restraint given to the story and the movie itself. It's a movie that's a slow builder, so if you're looking for all-out blood and gore near the beginning or lots of violence, you're not actually going to find it here. This one here wants to get under your skin and kind of unnerve you. It does kind of unleash towards the end, and I don't want to give anything away too much, but the actual movie itself, along with the style, everything about the movie just seems to work, and it works well. Some of the casting in the movie is actually kind of fun too. You have standard creepy guy Tom Noonan, who I'm sure is a nice guy in real life, but every movie that I've seen him in, namely Manhunter, and this one, he honestly is just pretty creepy with his delivery, and as soon as you see him and the way that he's acting, you know something's up. Another fun cameo, I guess you could call it a cameo, is of Dee Wallace. For those who don't know her, she's actually the mom from Critters and also E.T., so it was kind of fun to see her here in a role. And we also have actress Greta Gerwig, who now has gotten big with her movie Lady Bird that she wrote and directed. And this is one of her starts here. It's one of her first films that she's ever done. And she does a good job here as the annoying best friend. While she's annoying, she just loves her friend and she wants what's best for her. She knows that this house and these people are no good. So, how does actress Jocelyn Donahue handle the movie? I think she handles it well. The movie is primarily focused on her. Namely, the first hour or so of the movie is pretty much exclusively her and her acting. It's not an easy role for someone to do, and for somebody with not a lot of screen credit to their name at this point in time, she handles everything wonderfully. With one of the things I want to talk about this movie, it's obviously a fairly low-budget independent horror film, and it actually handles its budget really well. There's not too many set pieces. The action is primarily set in the house. However, with the direction of Ty West, his camera angles and movements give you that authentic 80s feel, and even with the way it's edited, it seems to have some awkward editing. Maybe some awkward cuts, but it's a welcome because in a lot of modern horror films, we get a lot of jump cuts to increase the intensity. This movie here lets the movie and the story itself breathe. It lets you get creeped out just by the little nuances in the set pieces here inside the house, such as the awkward noise that you hear. And honestly, if any of us were in Samantha's position in this movie, I think we would all be legitimately creeped out. You don't know a whole lot about the family. You don't know a whole lot about the house. Once she starts doing some investigation, there's definite cause for concern when she sees some things throughout. She doesn't even see one of the most horrific things in the movie, which I'm not going to spoil here. I'll let you guys discover that on your own. But this is definitely one that you should check out. Sit back, turn down the lights, and enjoy it. It's a movie that is classy. It's a homage, but you know what? It's one of those that doesn't copy. It actually goes in some different directions than what you would think it would go in. And with that, I think I'm going to close out tonight's episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM, and also give a listen to our podcast and our honest opinion. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 14 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring Andy Nyman and Martin Freeman in Jeremy Dyson and Andy Nyman's 2017 play-turned-anthology film, Ghost Stories. Co-writer and director of Ghost Stories, Andy Nyman plays skeptic Professor Philip Goodman, who disproves psychics and the paranormal. He sets out on a journey through 3 different unsolved and unexplained cases, and by the end, he may no longer be a skeptic. So going into this one, it's a movie that I knew next to nothing about. I didn't know that it was an anthology film. I did read that it was a popular stage play, but the anthology film aspect definitely was a big surprise. I like the fact that it had 3 separate stories, and then I also like that they kind of interlocked more or less. It does have a wraparound story, which by the end it may or may not work for you. It may be a deal breaker of your enjoyment of the film. Personally, I enjoyed this film quite a bit. Everything presented here is pretty sound. I mean, it's got some definite good creepiness to it. It does have a lot of jump scares, so if you're not a fan of jump scares, this may not be the movie for you. But overall, the movie looks great from a direction standpoint. There's some beautifully shot, and all the acting is actually really good in it too. One of the big surprises was that I've seen some of these actors before. Obviously, Martin Freeman was in the Fargo TV show, he was in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he was in the Hobbit prequel films. He's been in a lot and he does a good job here. I really like the way he gave a very, I would say, varied performance throughout. It's tough to really talk about too much on this film just because I want to avoid spoilers. It's best to not know anything about it, so I'm going to kind of dance around some things here. But keeping with the acting side and surprise casting, I was surprised to see also that Andy Nyman, I actually saw him in other things, such as Dead Set. He was the annoying producer of Big Brother UK, and I hated him in Dead Set, but I actually really liked him here in this. He gave a pretty good performance overall, and especially this movie pretty much rode on him, and I think he sold the movie. And then also you have actor Alex Lawther, and you may not know the name, however, I'm sure if you have seen Black Mirror, you would immediately recognize this kid. He was actually in the Shut Up and Dance episode of Black Mirror, which is another episode of Black Mirror that approaches some dark things. Here he gives a very nervous and twitchy performance, and it works. I actually kind of enjoyed what he did here. So this movie, again, that I stated before, it was a total surprise. I know critics gave it some good reviews. I know the Internet Movie Database score, I know some people gave it really good reviews and praise, and then others gave it some pretty bad reviews. And I think those are probably people that did not like the explanation and did not enjoy the ending. I don't know if it was exactly a surprise overall. However, it was one of those that it worked for me. I enjoyed the way it was done. I enjoyed the way it was presented. It was one of those that I will never forget the ending to. It didn't exactly catch me by surprise, but I wasn't expecting it to be carried out the way that it did. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this movie, and it was just a pleasant surprise all around. I like it when I can find a movie that I think is a little bit of a gem, and when you don't know much about a movie and you blind watch something and come away pleasantly surprised, it's a great feeling, and that's the kind of feeling I got here. Now, going back to the direction on the film, this movie is very classically styled. It gave me a feeling of some of the old British anthologies, maybe like Tales from the Crypt or Vault of Horror, but more of a, I guess, slant on the supernatural, obviously, since this was ghost stories. But it just gave me a little bit of that feeling, and that was kind of cool too. I haven't gotten that feeling from a anthology film. I haven't gotten that feeling for quite a while, and thankfully this movie, I think it did a good job with everything that it attempted to do. Again, I'm trying not to go into spoiler territory, and I suggest that if you are going to check out this movie, just go ahead and either pick it up or do something, but don't really read about this movie, because the more that you read, the more it's going to give it away, and it might hamper your enjoyment on this film. And with that, I'm going to end this episode. As a reminder, I'm on Twitter. You can find me at Adam_FBGM. Also, check out our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. Good night.